Hello everyone, at least I hope someone's out there and will let me know about the technical difficulties for the day, which seems like it might include the audio not being synced again. So let me know in the chat. Sorry, just trying to fix a few things. It's hard to get it all figured out. Let me know in the chat if it seems like things aren't synced as well as we might like them to be. Hi Bryce. And anyone else who's out there. I just have the chat open, so I can't really see how many people are here or anything. It's not synced. Okay. Let's take a guess at what might make that work. So, does that seem better? It seems a little better. Or am I ahead now? No, I don't think I'm ahead. I'll change it just a little bit more. Okay. Well, I'm not sure it's 100% synced, but you guys let me know what you think. Or if I did go too far and now I'm ahead. So it's my last show before Reapercon. So I've still got our Noel Pirate buddy to work on. I might be able to get him finished during the stream, but we'll see. But I also brought, so typically those of us who paint for Reaper, I'm excited to see you too, Bryce. When we visit Reaper is when we bring our miniatures in. There were a couple of instances of events transpiring during shipping, so we try to avoid shipping. But because of COVID and the quarantine and everything, I have like 2 years of miniatures stacked up, or a year and a half, I guess, of miniatures stacked up, which is unusual. So I was pulling them all aside to get them packed up for the trip, but I thought, why not let you guys, I can show them on stream for the benefit of those of you who aren't coming to Reapercon, or just if you think that might be interesting. But if you don't think that sounds cool, I can just get down to painting. So I guess one for look at some miniatures that are traveling to Reaper on Wednesday, and 2 for just finish painting that knoll. I mean, I'll still work on the knoll after I show you the miniatures. Okay, people seem excited about seeing the miniatures, so let's switch over to that camera and zoom in some. Also more light for you. Yes, I did turn it on. So I'm going to start with a Reapercon related miniature, and this is the Drunken Mermaid. If you watched Reaper Live on Thursday, I had sent Ron some preliminary pictures. The main thing that changed, I did some little touch-ups and stuff, but the main thing that will have changed from those pictures is the anchor. So if you go back and look at the show, I just did some really quick highlights on a few areas of the anchor to give it some dimensions so that I could take the pictures for Ron. But I intended to paint it in this way where it looked kind of rusted and corroded and stuff. And I had run out of time before Reaper Live. So I'm like, well, I'll just put some highlights on so people can see the shapes of the anchor. And then I'll get back to that fun process, which did take a while. But, and I do have our buddy, actually. I found my Sir 4 scale. So she is a significantly sized figure if you didn't get the swag or the Brian Wind box to get her. She's so that's partly why I had some of this Tia Golramos. I didn't work on this one online. I showed my copy when I received it, and then I ended up doing the paint kind of last minute, and I had to really kind of buckle down, so I wasn't able to do it on stream. There may be someone else who's been working on theirs online. But I ended up wanting to emphasize different textures, which is, there is the mystery arm. If you paint her hair, so I think it'd be dangerous in some ways if you paint her hair blonde and give her fair skin. It would make it harder for the viewer to spot that arm straight off. But when I started painting, I'm like, you know what? She's not a person. She doesn't have to have person-colored skin. So I wanted to have some fun with blue greens and green blues. So, And for those of you who've been watching or reading when I've been talking a lot about kind of critique and feedback and things we can do differently on miniatures. So I was pushing textures a lot on this one, but it wasn't a plan from the beginning. But, I guess I did show kind of an in-progress thing last week. That's true. But I ended up working a lot on a warm, cool kind of thing. So the warmest colors on the figure are in the kind of key zone if you don't have another area of focus. So her skin tones are quite warm, whereas her hair and the tail are cool. This is a bit of a warm red, but it's also darker, so I don't think it draws too much attention away. What draws a little more attention away is how light the sand is. But, Valinder the Red said you can barely teal the difference on the figure itself. Yeah, I actually tried teal, and it was 2 in the middle, so I was looking at teal for the blues, but I like this teal. Since this is one of my class figures, and I had these paints out for prepping for my class, but I'm like, nope, that's not quite right. It needs just a little more hint of green. So that was one way to try to get her face to stand out. And then the fact that her face and skin are really the main smooth things on the figure, and everything else has some kind of texture, whether it was there, I painted it in. So this wood texture is sculpted into the miniature. I mean, you have to accent it with paint to make it show. The rope texture is also sculpted. But this is sculpted smooth, so you could paint that as a cloth banner or something else if you wanted to. But I decided to try to paint it like a really old wood sign. I think it's maybe a little darker than would be optimal. Old wood can get very dark, and I think it at least has the benefit that it doesn't compete with the face much. Because if there's writing, that's another, like, people's eyes are drawn to look at symbols and letters and numbers and stuff. So I wouldn't want to accent all of that too much, because it would start being the thing that people look at first instead of looking at her face. Well, okay, I mean, it is a mermaid. People probably look at her bust first, but whatever. So I'm fairly happy with how this worked out. I think I'll probably go ahead and enter it in the contest even, since I did go nuts with texture time. But let's see who else is here. Well, if you're feeling hot today, let's try and cool it down and look at some Christmas figures. So this is the Krampus from the Little Krampus Mini Learn to Paint kit. My copy is metal. My copy of the mermaid was metal too, because in both cases the Bones USA figures didn't exist in time to send for me to get them painted in time to have all the stuff done. So I think there was a stream where I showed some Yetis that I had been working out the color schemes on, talking about how sometimes I got lucky with the mermaid and the colors mostly came together, even though I was doing it off the cuff. Off the cuff does not always work. So you can't get mad at yourself when it doesn't. If you really have something that's an important project, I recommend doing some just quick color tests on paper or a spare figure or something like that. Bryce said, I don't think Ron will like the mermaid. You may have to give it to someone else. I'm not even sure Ron's going to get it, Bryce. Every now and then I paint something that I feel like I have to keep, because otherwise I don't have anything to sort of track my progress on, and I think that might be one of those. Sarducci says, if you were going to paint her as a wooden statue with flaking paint, how would you approach that? It's interesting you ask that, because that was my original intention. And I would approach that by... I'd do the paint first, and then I would paint on the wood, and then do anything around it that needed to be flexed. I don't have it with me, because it's not going to Reapercon, but if you... I posted it a couple weeks ago on my Facebook page again, but I did a painting of the Frost Giantess, Cloud Giantess. I'm not sure which one she is. Big figure. She's got like a staff with a horse head or something like that, and it looks kind of Celtic. I painted the statue or the staff as if it were painted wood at the top. So I painted it like blue and red, and then the color that I used for the wood, I painted on flakes. And you'll sometimes want to paint like a little white edge where the flakes are towards the light, and then a little dark edge where they're away from the light, to give that impression of the flake being a slight depression. And I one of the reasons it took me so long to paint the mermaid is because I was really torn about that idea, because my concern about painting it as a painted statue is typically, a painted ship's prow or other nautical type wood statue. I looked up and did some research. They're not painted to like convincingly look like a real person. So if you scale that down to a miniature, I would have to paint it poorly and then add the chips to really do it. And my concern was, would it look like a chipped painted wooden statue, or would it look like crappy painting? So since it was for Ron, and I know that he would like things to look attractive and so customers can tell what everything is, I decided to go with I'll paint it to look nice. But I am still interested in the idea of painting it to look chipped. And I would definitely emphasize the wood cracks. So if you go back and look at this, where you have areas of wood showing, I don't know if I can zoom in even more. Yes, I can. So there's a couple areas, and I don't know how well it shows up on yours because my monitor's kind of crummy. There's a couple of areas where I actually did manage to make it look like this wasn't just texture, but that it actually indents into, it's the ridgy old wood, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And were I to do, especially since if I do another one, it will be on Bones USA, I might distress the figure before I even started to paint it. So gouge some cracks in to look like cracked wood, stuff like that. I guess since we're here, you can look at it a little close up again. I'm going to have to mute and cough a bunch, so I apologize for that in advance. My sinuses are just really not happy right now. So yeah, Sarducci, on the figure I'm talking about, I'm not sure if it was subtle enough that people didn't get what I was doing with that staff. I maybe needed to make the painted colors a bit like, they're darker than the wood, but they may not be dark enough than the wood. I apologize. Okay, so this is one that a lot of people seem to like, even though it didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to. And that goes back to some of the stuff we're talking about catching the viewer's eye and definition and stuff like that. So yes, he does look very skulk in the shadows, but he looks skulk in the shadows to the point that if there are other things on a shelf with him, he may not be the one that stands out. In fact, he will not be the one that stands out. Let's see if I can get a few figures and kind of demonstrate. Let's hear someone that stands out, because it's a very saturated color. Then even though this one isn't very saturated color, I mean, there's a bit of saturated color on the Christmas wreath, but the face and hair being so much lighter makes it stand out. So there's kind of, sometimes you have to balance painting to be really accurate or to really fit a character description with painting to make an attractive looking object. So that's a big challenge in our field. And what actually happened here is I did have a little more of that. There was more light here. But Ron had said he wanted him like sooty and dirty. Like he's someone's ahead of him carrying the torch in the dungeon. So I used weathering powders for that, and I ended up covering over too many of my highlights. So he's cool. He's just not quite as cool as I wanted him to be. But that's okay. I do like how the colors came out. Sort of two different kinds of brown. Maybe even three. Now I can't remember if I did his boots something different again. So that's that guy, who I think is Bones USA also. So I'll go back to the Christmas ones for a minute. This lady has some companions, because this is a take on the ghosts of Christmas past and future. And present. There's present. At least I think I got them right. Thanks, Rainier. That kind of color scheme can work well in an illustration or something like a comic book, because you control the background and stuff. But if you're taking something to a contest like Reapercon or just putting it on your shelf at home, it has to compete with a lot of background noise. And that's why sometimes we have to make the choices between characterization and artistic things. Well, visual clarity. So this, I believe, is Christmas Past. And I think that Bob Rodolphe sculpted all of these. And this was interesting. Non-metallic metal, or no, OSL is kind of a thing that I've been working on for several years. I teach classes in it. So every few years I have to paint another miniature in it just to see if I've learned something new, which I had. And normally I tell people not to try painting white on an OSL figure. So that was what made this interesting, is that if I wanted to go by the classic depiction of this ghost from A Christmas Carol, I would have to paint the dress white. And then I also did another thing I will tell people not to do in my OSL classes, which is some of the colors on the figure are quite saturated colors, red and green, for Christmas. And light color and saturated colors are things we use to make something look like it's either the light source or it's being illuminated by the light source. And so to use them in areas that are going to be darker is tricky, because it's fighting some of the kind of things that make it easier to do source lighting. Like, you notice the green on the base is actually pretty dark, the green and red berries, because I don't really want you looking there. If that's the shadow area, you wouldn't be looking at it as much. I'm not entirely happy with this. I think the division between the light and the dark areas, I think I should have blended that a little bit softer, a little bit more like on the arm. It was this dramatic in the reference photo that I took, which is also something I recommend for OSL. But the reference photo is done with a very, like, the light is very close to the figure. I use a little, like a tiny mag light flashlight, and then I take it off, so it's just the bulb, and then I hold it where the flame is. So in this case, I was holding the mag light like this. Well, actually, I was making my husband hold the mag light like this while I took the photos and turned it to different angles. But it was still, I mean, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, because I think the light source really does look bright, and the reflection works pretty well. The reflected light, I should say. And then this is the Ghost of Christmas Present, which is, it's always fun when I usually paint the Christmas miniatures for Reaper, which means I've had to paint a lot of red and green and gold in my days. I kind of wanted the mug to look like one of those Moscow Mule mugs, so I painted that as a copper mug instead of iron or silver or whatever else people make the mugs out of. I think that one was actually Ron's favorite, because he liked the colors and how the coat came out and stuff. And then this is the wonderfully creepy ghost of future. Yeah, ghost of the future yet to come, something like that. And Bob likes the creepy, so that's probably why this one is so cool. So I had fun with them. I liked that it was, I mean, I almost always like the Christmas miniatures, but it was interesting to see something that reflected like a classic book like that. I'm not sure that we have a lot of representations like that in the Reaper line, or even just in general. Wait, there's a couple more Christmas, because that was Christmas 2019, and then these are Christmas 2020. Oh, there is one more. I was like, I thought there was one more. I'll zoom back out for a minute. So we had the Mistletoe Goblin, just cat and Christmas tree. I don't know. I don't remember the names that Ron gave them, actually. I try and I fail. So this guy is just so adorable. My parents liked him so much that they've asked me to paint another copy for them. So he's got a little box of chocolates, but he couldn't resist eating one. Actually, I think he ate 3. But he's also got his mistletoe, and he's all puckered up and ready to kiss. I had fun with him. Fun with playing with different colors of red and still trying to get some focus here. I don't know if I was successful, but there is a post on my blog about this one. It's something about painting red or focus. I do have swatches on there of the colors I used and how I approach painting the reds to try to keep the attention higher up the body. So that's why his pants are darker red, because that's the story of the figure, is not really his feet. Although there's a little story there, because, can I get in even closer? His shoes are a little worn out and his toe is popping out, and I think that's just adorable. But yeah, he's a tiny little guy. Where's Sir Forscale? Because he's just a little Christmas goblin. Kreniko says, I love the Christmas minis. Me too. They're always so much fun. It's kind of almost a seasonal tradition for me now to paint the Christmas minis. And then this one, there's a whole series of cat dragons causing problems, I think. So this, if you have had a cat, you may have experienced this, because I've had a cat. She didn't turn the whole tree over, but she did used to climb about halfway up and then just hang out. And then this is actually painted as one of my cats, who, to be fair, has never attacked the Christmas tree. I don't know why. It doesn't really pique his interest. But he is kind of a troublemaking little cat. He doesn't necessarily mean to be. So he's painted like our orange tabby. Our orange tabby also has that ruff around his neck, so it fit really well. And then I just kept the baubles and the presents fairly simple colors so as not to distract from him. There was already so much green, I didn't think I could make a green present. Often I try to make a green present when there's presents on them. There's some where I've painted little patterns and stuff. But these ones, because there's so much texture in the tree, I felt like it was better not to paint a pattern on them. And this is Julie, of course, because Julie does such great animals and animals that skew to the fantastic. And I believe the little goblin, oh, now I don't know if it was Bob or Julie. It was one of Bob or Julie, and I'm not 100% sure which. Oh, I didn't give you a scale for the little kitty. But it's a metal miniature, so it's a solid chunk because of how thick that tree is. And then we have one of the sweetest little dragons ever. There's a series of dragons. One has a stocking. One has a present that he's opening, I think. I feel like there's another one, but maybe I'm just forgetting. QT Patootie 2020 asks, where do you get those minis? So every year Reaper does the 12 days of Reaper. And they usually start sometime in late November, I think. They don't go right at actual, Christmas, Yule, etc. And that'll be each day. If you make a minimum amount purchase, you get the miniature of the day. And then the past couple years, at the end of the 12 days, they've been putting the remaining stock on sale on the website, so you can just pick out the ones you want. So if you aren't already on the Reaper Facebook group and you use Facebook, I would recommend checking that out. Or you can just go to their website, starting in mid-November, check out their website. And they usually put up like a calendar of what the 12 days miniatures are as soon as they can get them. Sometimes that calendar is a little late, or there are silhouette pictures because I'm still painting. So hopefully this year that will not be the case. I'm pretty sure that this guy was a silhouette for a minute. And I just that the way the dragon is hugging the bear just warms my sad little heart. But there are so many cool nerd things on the base. So there's some bottles of paint, there's some paint brushes, there's another set of paint brushes down here, there's a book that you could say is whatever your favorite role-playing book, there's a little bat, there's a little sock monkey puppet, there's some more books back here. This dragon is actually, and I don't remember the name of the toy, but Julie told me that one of her and Bob's favorite toys when they were young, they didn't know each other when they were young, they just coincidentally, and of course this is why they're married now, both loved this when they were kids. And then there's, this is a death, like a chibi death puppet, and then there's some candy canes. If you get this miniature and you're not sure what everything is, I posted this one on my blog. I was talking about painting non-metallic metal because I decided to paint the dragon essentially non-metallic metal. But I also kind of took pictures and circled things and gave you a guidebook to what the various things are on the base, because before you've painted it, it can be harder to see some of those things. Because there's even, I think there's like a pair of socks in between the dragon's legs. There's a little kitty stuffed animal. Well, I chose to depict it as a stuffed animal. There, you could, and I chose to depict this, but before I heard the story, I chose to depict this like a pewter miniature. But I really, so I love the miniature, but one of the reasons I made the post is painting this non-metallic metal was really, my patience was thin. I mean, this is November 2020, not the best year ever. I was having a lot of trouble focusing and doing tough painting. So I painted all these little things on the base, and that was no problem. I think I actually started with those. And they were just small and quick, so I could finish and get that sense of completion quickly. But this non-metallic metal was a slog. It's one of those techniques, so if you haven't tried it, or if you've tried it and been frustrated, there are effects or techniques where you can't tell if it worked until you're done or you're almost done. And non-metallic metal is definitely one of those. Like, it might look like crap up until the last 10%, and then it's just, you've got the lightest bits in, you've got the darkest bits in, and everything kind of comes together a bit. So that one was a bit challenging, and I've been having problems doing, high-level focus painting up until very recently. The mermaid's really the first thing I've done where higher level painting hasn't been a complete misery. Kuroniko says, we can't have a Christmas tree anymore due to one of our cats. He ended up at the vet because he tried to eat it. Ugh. And also that Julie does the best minis, which I agree, she excels at Christmas. Aries Noir, I hope I'm saying it right. So those are such adorable minis, and I love the soft highlighting. Checking out the Reaper miniature site. Well, thank you. And you can probably find some others of my miniatures here and there, and then some by some other great painters. Reaper makes a ton of minis, so they have to have a ton of us trying to work on it. Okay, I've confirmed that that's all Christmas. There is one other holiday one, though, but a different holiday. So this is Christine Van Patten sculpted this little guy. Let's get this for 4-scale back. And this one I do remember his name. His name is Finn Greenwell. And I think you can guess which holiday he belongs to. And I tried to give him little 4-leaf clovers on the ground. So I have these tiny plants. I think they were for people doing like fingernail polish stuff, and they'll glue stuff on and then lacquer over it. So I think that's what it's for. So that's a good way to get really tiny plants. If you go to a store like Joann's or Michael's, I recommend that you bring, like, you don't have to bring a painted one, but bring a miniature with you to hold up next to the dry flowers, because you will think things are super tiny. So of course they must go with miniatures, and then you'll get them home and you'll be like, well, that's almost as big as his head. Which there are probably uses for little flowers that are as big as a miniature's head, but sometimes you want something that's a little smaller just for bases and stuff. And they're out there, but I find it helpful if I'm shopping in person to bring a miniature with me, or to make sure that I'm going, okay, there's an inch, and then compare the flower to that. But for online, you could look for these nail polish. I mean, just type nail tiny flowers maybe and see what you get out of that. I'm pretty sure someone else had posted that they got them on like Facebook or something, and then I went looking for them because I was aware of it from that. I think there's also, so I drink tea, and I will sometimes, after I steep the tea, if it's loose leaf or if it's in a bag, but it's interesting, I'll leave it out to dry to make like base detritus. So the little things that look like sticks, I think, are part of the tea. But it gives a nice dirt texture, and then you kind of get those little sticks and stuff mixed in. So there is a post of him, too, where I list all the colors that I used. And then I also talk about that idea of focus. Because honestly, the focus and the shelf presence is something that I have not historically been great at. So I've been talking to you guys about it a lot, partly because I'm thinking about it a lot. So this one I think is a little more successful than the Mistletoe Goblin, in that the focus is, right here. It's his face and his beard and his, cheeky little expression. And And that was a choice. Like, I was picking my colors. If you look at the socks, they're a slightly duller beige than anything I used on the scarf. So I want them to look like in the family, like he matches and stuff, but I don't want it to be as bright so that you're not, looking at his calves or whatever. That's not the story of this figure. And that's interesting because the beer mug on the Sophie is kind of similar to this guy. So Christine's been having to sculpt a lot of rustic beer mugs lately, I guess. So let's catch up on chat. Lord Dave said he loves the Finn. Such a fun sculpt. I slightly modified that and painted it for my son to use for his Tinker Gnome PC. Oh yeah, I could see where he'd be a great Tinker Gnome. And then Mike M91 says, many of the Christmas minis are seasonally available. Keep an eye on Reaper site or socials for announcements when the Christmas minis and specials are announced. Aries Noir says that is a clever trick, which I assume you mean the focus thing. Yes, I try to post, once I finish painting the miniatures and Reapers put them live and stuff, I try to post on my own Facebook page and stuff as well. And then if I've got articles that go with them, I post those. I usually post on Instagram as well, I believe. So this is, oh golly, I'm blanking on her name now. She was from the Dreadmere figures, so this Reapercon and last year's that ended up being online are pirate themed. But before that, we were in Dreadmere for a while, which is this like swampy, dismal area of despair. And I know she doesn't look like a swampy, dismal despair figure, but she's the madam of a brothel. And this is actually some kind of narcotic drug, I believe, that's in her pipe. But she's described as someone who really likes looking quite fancy and dressing up a lot. And I had a lot of fun with that idea. This one, it's slightly different. So it's green and blue with a little bit of teal in it rather than the blue-green and green-blue of the mermaid. And the fan is not sculpted to be peacock fillet. Madame Delia, thank you, Kiraniko. The fan is not sculpted to be peacock figures, feathers. It's feathers, but I decided to add the peacock thing on because it went so well with the colors I'd already painted for her dress. And then her hair is, I don't know if you can tell on the video, it's supposed to look like that. Sometimes people get their hair dyed and it's kind of like a dark burgundy. It's not really a red hair that occurs in nature, but I think it's a cool color, and it just seemed like she'd be the kind of person who'd get her hair dyed and maybe do something like that. So I went with that to have a bit of that red-green contrast. So this is working a little bit with complementary colors because there's also red in her face, and the green in the dress helps play that up. And then I made the jewels kind of a pinky burgundy for the same reason, so they'd stand out a little more. If they were blue, they probably wouldn't really stand out that well. And then if I made the metal parts gold, so if I made it a yellow gem, it'd be hard to tell if it was a gem or if it was non-metallic metal. And then you could, so I originally painted her and she wasn't on a base, and Ron said put her on a base, and I actually had I have some of those pre-sculpted resin bases, but you can only see like 2 millimeters of base. That's how great her dress is. And there is Izzy Italian Collier. There is art that she did that was the basis for this. And I think it was Bobby Jackson who sculpted this, but I'm not 100% sure. This is the downside of the show. You guys are discovering how bad my memory is. I try to hide that as much as possible, but sometimes it's too difficult. Oh, the one other change that Ron had asked for is, and I think I saw it in the art, and I don't know why. Maybe I was concerned it wouldn't read at the small level, but she has beauty marks, which are probably also applied and not natural, much like her hair. So there's one on her cheek, and then there's just a little one on her décolletage. Let's see who else is here. Well, there's a whole mess of these guys, so let's look at some goblins. And this goblin had an adventure, but was it that one or the other one? No, it's the other one actually. So there's 2 on wargs, And I believe these are Bones 5, so if you got your Bones 5 fulfilled and you ordered these, you have these now. Yeah, Kerniko says her dress is too much for one base to handle. I agree. These are actually resin or prints. They might be prints. Because, of course, the point of Bones 5 was to make them in Bones, so they didn't exist in Bones at the time that I painted them. But these two leader type guys on the wargs have a lot of little assistants. Just checking if there's even more. I think that's all of them. So I have a couple posts up on the blog about painting these as well. I got these soon after I got my Reaper Vex airbrush. And I'd been taking a class with Aaron Lovejoy and trying to practice a little more, so I thought I would try to use the airbrush to start with them. So I just did the skin, I didn't do the other parts, and I ended up doing a lot of brush work, really, because my airbrush skills are still in process, and they're very small. I mean, if we look at them next to Sir 4 scale there, that's not the easiest thing to maybe start airbrushing on. Zero Zure says, I believe the Goblin Riders were in the Dungeon Dwellers expansion for Bones 5. This sounds pretty plausible to me. So one of the things I talked about in the blog post for this, if I'm recalling correctly, is I kind of tried to break them into groups when it got to doing their accessories. So some of them have kind of teal cloth, and some of them have kind of blue cloth, and then some of them have kind of purple cloth, I think. No, he was one of the teal. So what I was doing is, where's my little color wheel? So these are orange goblins. So if I put my complementary on orange, and you do a split complementary, you get blue green, and blue violet are the split complementary, and then blue is the straight complementary. So I used those colors for their clothing to play off the orange and accent the orange, but I kept it dull because they're goblins. They're not going to have, super bright color, well maintained outfits. And then, of course, one of the things I talk about on the blog is, like, are goblins orange in your world, or are they green? So the orange is the old school traditional, and Reaper has a lot of green goblins, I think. So Ron's a very old school guy sometimes, so he wanted to have them in orange. Then the other choice I made is, so when I started painting them, I did two as kind of like a test thing. I think it was these two, but I'm not 100% sure. So I did testing kind of the airbrush thing and whether it worked before I worked on all of them and decided it didn't work. And when I did the test, I did it with non-metallic metal, and I just felt like I don't know, they weren't well defined. They weren't reading well at a distance. So, probably because they're so small. So I decided to switch to real metals to add that additional contrast of finish. So to contrast like the matte parts with the shiny metal parts. And I think that did help. I'm happy that I did that. These guys are Bobby Jackson too, I believe. And Harrison Noir says he really likes Goblin with the crossbow. And yeah, he's pretty fun. The face was a little challenging to get the brush in there and paint, but it was worth it because he's very fun. Bobby gave him the great body language, I think. I think this one may be my favorite because I feel like he's like the old wise one of the group. He's seen some things. He's tired of the shenanigans. He just wants to get this done and go home. And he has that really neat musculature on the back. And then there's this guy who's very intense. And this was a bit of a change for me. There's some more kind of old dark wood. And you'll notice the color, like there's brown, but there's kind of gray, and it's just dulled down. And I think that's one way to make something look more like old wood or furniture wood. It's not as, brown and cream and stuff. Which will apply on the base of the knoll too. And this guy's he means business. He wants those kids off his lawn. And I assume that these will be coming to retail probably as a pack, but I don't know. They may split them up a different way. That is out of my pay grade. I can't remember if I showed I don't think I showed this guy already. So I did keep them pretty uniformly as a group. I think I tried to make some of them a little more like yellowy orange and some of them a little more reddish orange, but it's pretty subtle, and I don't know that it contributes a great deal to the end result, but I felt it was more important that they really kind of all look like a group. This one's a little afraid, I think. I think he's covering for it. I think he would really just rather not be here having a fight. And then we've got the wargs, which I think I'm going to have to zoom out for the wargs. So I'll get Sir Forescale back. They are impressive beasties. My guy came glued, so I think if you got this in the Dungeon Dweller's box, he's probably not sat as far back on the warg. And it was an interesting challenge with them. Like, I wanted the wolves to, look scary and look cool and stuff, but not really detract from the riders. Like in this particular scenario, there'd be, you might have a standalone wolf, and the wolf is the story then, and I would give that more attention and more color variation and value changes and stuff. But in this case, I didn't want to detract from the goblin himself. So I kept the colors pretty basic. There's a little color variation. There's places where it's a little more brown and other places where it's a little more like purple gray, like that kind of color, or something like that, I think is what I used. But I did try to give him, like, they've got blue eyes and then little pink noses so that they have a little bit of their own personality. And then this is the other one with the warg is in a different pose, but I painted him in a very similar way. Now, this is an interesting story. So I know people always obsess about sealers and stuff, and then I tell you guys not to worry about it. You don't have to seal bones, and you don't have to prime bones. These are actually resin or prints. I don't remember. I think they're resin, but I mean, it looks finished enough on the bottom that I think it's resin. So I have a shelf that's about, I don't know, it's about eye level to me, and I'm 5'5". And these guys were on the shelf. That's like kind of where my work in progress shelf is, which is handy. And I have it at eye level intentionally because when I walk by, I can assess the miniatures when I'm not in paint mode, and then they're in normal rim light. So there are things where, like last week when I was painting this guy, I added that little brown part in his face, and I said maybe he doesn't need to have colored eyes. It stands out enough. And it stands out pretty well on camera with this nice gray background, but when I put him on my shelf and there's all that background noise and normal lighting, those parts don't stand out as well. So that's kind of why I have that shelf. But anyway, things were on the shelf, and I reached behind to get something else, and this guy must have caught my sleeve or something, and it fell on the floor. So it fell from at least 4 feet up. I'm going to say 4.5 feet up. And the arm broke off, and it broke in 2 places. But, and I've glued it, but all I've done is, so I think it broke at the wrist, which I fixed a while ago, and then just recently I fixed where it broke at the shoulder. So first of all, don't tell Ron. I'm kidding. You can tell her. But there's no paint damage, because I do all that stuff I tell you to do on my blog. So go to my blog and look for, it's in the first few links. It's something like how to paint a sturdy paint job. And the actual title of the article is how to paint miniatures that will survive the apocalypse or at least a minor fall. And I can verify, we don't have carpet either. We used to have carpet, which was nice for miniatures, but bad for other things. But we switched to vinyl tile. So it's not like as hard as stone or something. But this miniature totally dropped. That is the nice thing about resin and prints, is that breaks are very clean. So with the metal, you may get where things bend. But resin is super fragile. I'm kind of like, how am I getting these guys to run without breaking them again? Because I don't have room for all of these in my transport case. So some things are going to have to get bubble wrapped and stuck in little boxes. But so there is, I mean, there's just a tiny little bit of paint damage right here. I can see some. You can see the crack right there. So I want to see if I can get that fixed up. But really the paint is only damaged where the break happened. There's no, like, just random chips and stuff. Oh, and I don't seal is the part that I don't seal my miniatures. I don't tell Ron that part because he thinks I do. But in my opinion, it's more important to make sure they're clean and that you have a good base on them. So for bones, that would just be good base, strong base coats. For these, I did prime them because they're resin, not bones. And then you use something like this so you don't touch the paint. You touch the paint as little as possible while you're painting so you're not rubbing it off. And then understanding that primer and paint are touch dry very quickly, but they take 24 to 48 hours to fully cure. So if you can avoid handling things, and at the point when I tipped it on the floor, it had been at least a few weeks since I had painted them, I think. Thank you, Arisnor. I'm trying to make my grays more interesting and my bases more interesting. So I'm glad that it's working. All right, this is... I do not know her name. Nope, I got nothing. But she was sculpted by Bob and somewhat inspired by the people from the Lord of the Rings in the... Now I'm forgetting. Bree. Is it Bree? Where the prancing pony is. So I scanned through that section of the movie, and they're there for like 3 seconds, and no women are shown, and it's very dark. So I'm like, okay, what else could I use to try to capture that feel? So I used to play the Lord of the Rings online game, so I looked up some screenshots from that, and this pattern isn't exactly that, but it was an inspiration for what I came up with to do the pattern. And then I don't have the test miniature here, but there's a blog post on this. Whenever I do something and it's remotely interesting or something I feel might be useful to someone else, I try to like take work in progress pictures or mental notes or about stuff to share. So I shared my tests for what I wanted was this to look a bit broken up, like it was more of a woven pattern than like an embroidery or something applied over the cloth. So I had to test out a few different ways to do that. So if I just painted lines really straight, it would look more like something on top of. Kiruniko is very helpfully contributing the names of all the things I can't remember. Isandris Nightbloom, female druid. So I figured out a way to, kind of apply it in more of a dot instead of it making a straight line, creating the line like with a series of dots. And that helped. Now you'll notice, you may or may not notice. So I did all right on this sleeve. It's pretty much in scale with the skirt. And this sleeve, I ended up going smaller. And that's just one of the things that can happen when you try doing freehanded. You probably didn't notice that until I mentioned it, but it happens. It doesn't mean that I was a complete failure to even try it or do it. So if that happens to you, doing patterns like that, that's one of the challenges, is trying to keep it in scale. And you could try to grid it out where you have just like a dot at each intersection, and then you make the rest of the lines as a way to try to help make geometric patterns more accurately geometric. But I was painting this one fairly quickly, I think. I don't think I had a huge time lead on that one, because this was like a miniature of the month. And so you have to get it done. Well, everybody always wants previews now too, so it's not even just getting it done for the beginning of the month, it's getting it done in time for previews and stuff. And she was a little bit, I was still trying to work on the focus ideas, so her hair is a fairly saturated blonde. I put a lot of contrast on her face, and it's very warm, so this again is like much warmer than anything else on the figure, even though this is a fairly warm leather. And then I used some similar colors on the hair and the wood to kind of bring it together, but the wood is much less saturated. So I probably painted them similar colors and then added the yellow on top. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. And then the base is just, it's a mix of, they have these base stamp things where it's like a texture and you can put putty or Sculpey in it. And when I have leftover putty, sometimes I'll just make little sections. So it's like a section of that, and then I put texture paste around that, so it kind of looked like an old road that was starting to get covered over with dirt and stuff. Aries Nora says, I'm new at painting, so I'm just here marveling at all the possibilities. And I try to cover basic stuff too. If you go back and look at some of the old streams, I try to hop around a little in the level of stuff that I'm talking about, so that there will be something useful for everyone. See, these are just some very basic rats. These were also in Bones 5, and I'm willing to bet also in the Dungeon Dwellers expansion box, but I'm not 100% sure. And then Ron said put them on bases. So some of the Reaper bases, and granted this is a slant base, and some of them are straight, but they're hollowed out underneath. They don't have the slot or anything like that, which is nice, because if you have a base like 4 scale, and then we can also do the scale thing, and you don't like the texture, or you want to expand it to make it a certain size for a game or whatever, you can put it inside the base and then fill up around it. And then it looks like it always came on that kind of base. But Ron was perplexed because I did it on ones where the base is a little slanted instead of putting it on top. But this way, they're not both standing on like giant stacks of things. This guy is standing a little bit on a stack of a thing because he was sculpted that way. And I genuinely cannot remember who sculpted these. I want to say Julie, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I was trying to make them grungy. So after I finished painting them, I think I was painting these at the Bones 5. They usually do like a little countdown party or something like that for the past 2 or 3 Bones. So I was at that, and I was painting them at the event. But then when I got home, I'm like, no, I got to make them like grosser and more grungy. So I added a lot of washes of, like, there's some green washes on the pink colors and stuff like that to make it look disquieting and gross and stuff. Oh, and there's their little creepy little faces. They're kind of cute in their own plague-ridden way. Right, this one isn't for Ron because this is my player character. So when the artists have a game that we play at Reaper sometimes, so one of the Reaper sculptors runs us through some fun adventures, and I had my character is a halfling thief, and she's female, but I decided whatever, I don't care, this is the figure I liked, because for years I had been using a dwarf, and then people would forget and they would think my character was a dwarf, and she's not. So I wanted to get like a genuinely halfling figure, and this is obviously a very good figure for a thief, but I wanted a little bling, so I went with a purple cloak. I may have been using, I think this was when I was trying to get used to the Pathfinder colors too. So sometimes when I get a bunch of new paint, I like to force myself to paint with it, as I've been doing with the Knoll. And I think I used the Pathfinder paints for this. There is a brief little blog post about this, but I don't know that it says anything very extensive. And Michael Proctor very kindly sculpted the base for me. I think this was a mini of the month also, and I kind of want to say that Bryce painted the one in the store, if you can confirm, Bryce. Yes, Stitch, Thimbletoe, Halfling Thief. Thank you, Kiriniko. And Wolf 360 said, I've been using the upside down bases for years. I feel they are to tell you if you use the bases intended. Well, some of them were intended like that, but I think they have a straight side. Yes, Bryce did. So go look at the one in the store because Bryce did like a really amazing paint job on it. This is, we are going to handle this figure, so I didn't go too nuts. Although I am now seeing a place where I totally did not notice. I probably did this while I was painting the base. I got a little drop of paint up there. We'll just say it's a stain. Maybe she's carrying something unpleasant in that little bag. All right, so I have 3 more that are related figures. And I believe these are... So some of these Bones 5 things that I've been showing you are backup for pledging in the 5.5. Bryce, how are you unhappy with that? He looks amazing. I was really impressed by that. And these are half of the Dark Desires? It's not Dark Desires. Anyway, there's a set of 3 succubi and 3 incubi, and I didn't get the incubi to paint, which is unfortunate because I would have enjoyed doing that as well. And my idea was where these ladies had kind of pinky purple skins, I would do kind of what if you had a tealish skin. So my idea was here that they're not natural human skin tones. These are sculpted by Jean, and Jean and I agreed that they shouldn't be like natural human skin tones, but I wanted them to look like natural skin tones. So Dark Temptations, well, 360 says. So if you want something to be like a color but still natural, like this is not going to look like a skin tone as is. It's like we call people brown and red and yellow and white, but none of us are any of those colors. It's just different kinds of tan and beige and, well, actually, brown. It is different kinds of brown. We call people black, but really most people are one shade or another of brown. So my idea with this is it's one shade or another of desaturated purple. And then the boys would be one shade or another of desaturated teal, if that makes sense. And there are loads of blog posts on these, specifically about the skin. So that includes the recipes. So if you're wondering, what the exact colors are, it includes the recipes and other information about painting the skin. And then the last post is the wings, which I painted sometime later. It's like I got done with all of them, and then I really hate gluing things. I really hate gluing things. So I put off putting the wings on for a really long time, even though they were, they're pretty good socket and key, or, ball and socket type joins. It's just I've been so cursed with gluing that I kind of put it off. So this was the first one I painted, I think. Well, the skin. I painted the skin first, and I think I did the hair, and then I went back. No, I didn't skip around that much. I did pretty much paint them individually, but then I painted the wings all at a go and the bases all at a go. And this is not a super, this is not the normal gold that I would paint typically. Let's get this guy back. So this is kind of my default gold, but this is why you shouldn't always just have a recipe. So if you look at those 2 golds, there's not a lot of red and warmth in it. It's a very cold color gold. And there are different colors of gold. So that's not unnatural or fake to do that. And I did that because I feel like if it was this warm color, because she's fairly cool colors and fairly desaturated colors, that this would really draw attention away from the skin. I mean, assuming that you could draw attention away from skin sculpted in quite this fashion. But just in case, I thought I would make some color choices to back that up. And weirdly, my favorite part is her cute little feet. Just how well Jean did the pose with the feet. How natural it looks, I mean, like the feet really look like that. And then this girl, I made the pillow because she's a darker skin color. And I talk about kind of the challenges of painting dark skin in the blog article about her skin. I gave her a slightly more saturated gold for the pillow. But then she has silver for her jewelry to mix it up a little. And then kind of the boss lady is this one. So I gave her, it's just, the translucency is pretty subtle on the front, the translucent skin, and I don't think there's anything TOS-able over here, even on the back. But painting transparent cloth is another thing that I teach and have done time to time, but it's, it requires a sculpt that suits it. Like you couldn't take Sir Four Scale. I mean, you could paint his cloth to be transparent to show chainmail underneath, possibly. Yeah, I don't think the edge is so thick on the front. The edge is a bit thick on the back. I mean, it'd be weird, but you could do it. But something like these pants, where the edge of the cloth is thick enough that I think you can't suspend disbelief that it could be a transparent material, because transparent materials are thin and clingy. I don't think I talked a lot about the transparent. I shared all the colors, so I recorded the colors for everything. So if you're like, what did I use to shade that blue? It is up there in a post somewhere. I don't think I talked a lot about painting the transparent cloth, though. I'm mainly focused on the skin and then the wings. And then, if you can see, I think you can see on the video. Kroniko says, I don't think Sir Four Scale is that kind of knight. Where I tried to take colors that I used on the figures and put it in the base. So it's gray, but there's a little bit of blue here, and there's a little bit of pink there, and there's a little bit of the gold yellow there. And that's just, I think I painted it all, and then I just took really, really thin down paint and painted individual stones, one of those three colors, to give it a little more life and interest. And I think that's all of the stuff that I'm bringing tomorrow. Well, there was one other thing, but I didn't have space for it in my little box. So I painted another version. I painted a green giant cobra for Bones 4. Or is it even Bones 3? I think it was Bones 4. And Ron was distressed and wanted a more desert cobra, so I repainted another one to be more deserty for him. So now I will, well, I mean, if anyone has any questions, just about any of the figures, feel free to let me know, but I will go back and see if I can get this figure finished up before I leave. I doubt it, but because I still have to pack and things. I mean, I've done some packing, but there's always more. Still have a few class things to finish up. So I'm gonna, I think, set up so that the, zoom out a little. Set up so that the palette is off camera, because the camera seems to have trouble focusing on the figure when I try to put the palette. Because I want you guys to see, I'm not trying to hide what I'm doing with my paint, but I figure it's more important for you to see what I'm doing on the figure, and I'll just try to remember to share things that I'm doing on the palette in between. So where I left off, I had done the thing on the face, which I kind of want to revise, but I think I'm going to start just base coating the, it's like wooden planks here on the base. I'm going to base coat that because it's probably going to take 2 coats and it's going to take a while to dry. And since I had kind of old wood colors out for painting the mermaid, I'm debating not, you know, I don't know if I'm breaking my own rules if I don't use I've been focusing on the colors from the swag boxes and the Kickstarter, but I have these other colors handy, so I think I'm just going to do that. Although I may dial down this, so this is Sky Smog, which is actually an RBE color. So it's a little yellowy. Let me just pull some out. It's a little yellowy, in my opinion, for kind of old deck plank wood. But actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it because we're going to do wash over it, and that will dull it down in other ways. So I'm just going to leave it like this. Kroniko asks, am I going to paint the male figures from the Demonic Temptations set? If any ever get mailed to me, I may. But so far I have not been provided with any of them to paint. I mean, I guess at this point they at least exist in. I'm not sure they ever printed any out. I think, or if they did, that they went straight to China. But since they do exist in Bones 5 now, perhaps I can use some of those. I don't know if I could take the amount of time it took to paint those and paint them to that standard, because those ladies suffered a bit from my 2020 sucks too. I mean, honestly, my 2019 sucked, so really they were suffering from my 2019 and then my 2020. But we did some renovations, and then we did some unplanned renovations, and I had a super busy year of con trips that year, and I just was having trouble getting stuff done. So really, that giant stack of things that I'm taking to Wrong should be a lot gianter. I'm sure that Michael's stack is enormous, and not just because he paints the big guys. But yes, on the fair is fair principle, because I've certainly painted my share of scantily clad ladies. I painted every few years. I like to paint a shirtless barbarian, just cause. And it probably has been a minute since I've done that. But I consulted on, so Jen Greenwald and I consulted on the incubi in the sense of we picked out some inspiration photos and kind of gave some feedback on, you know, what women consider sexy isn't necessarily the super muscled power fantasy barbarian. Like, some people like that, and some people like that sometimes, but it's not the only thing that all women find attractive. So that is why you have some other variations on the incubi. Jen was very diligent about digging up inspiration photos for Jean. She really, you know, took a hit for the team and sacrificed her time in that very unpleasant task. And I also was, you know, totally miserable helping her. So yeah, just today I saw another discussion, another promotional thing from a paint company about how the paint is, all the paints are equally opaque and they will only take two coats to cover. Because you notice that this paint didn't cover in one. It's pretty good. I mean, it'll probably be good by 2 coats, but it might need a third on the place where I had like black around the bottom of the feet. And I do get why people want that, but I'm kind of frustrated by it in a way also because it's not, people aren't making crappy paint. If you get paint that's transparent, if you get a transparent yellow or transparent red, that is not crappy paint. That is, red pigments are transparent and yellow pigments are transparent. So if you want it to be a really bright red or yellow, it's going to be at least semi-transparent. If it's not transparent, that means that somebody mixed a bunch of white and black in it to make it less transparent. So it's not really as vivid. And if you mix with it, even if it looks pretty vivid, it probably won't mix as clean. See, it already hates the mallet. As a paint that looks, that is somewhat transparent and looks really vivid. So it's like, I don't mind that some, you know, people who are gamers or whatever want paint that covers in as few coats as possible. I have no problem with that at all. I just mind paint companies, miniature paint companies, implying that paint that isn't opaque is bad paint. Because honestly, transparency is a feature depending on what you're trying to do. It's not always a feature, I do get that. But it's like the mermaid. I ended up using this color, PR. I used real PR 122, which is this, quinacridone magenta. And you can see, because Golden does the stripes, that this is a very transparent paint. I used some of this, and then I had a Liquitex one too that I used. That's slightly less transparent because they did some kind of thing to it to make it a little less transparent, so it's probably a little less vivid. But it looked pretty similar. And I was mainly using it for glazes, a tie-in company and stuff. A tie-in color, I should say. But for those purposes, it was a feature to me that was a transparent color or a semi-transparent color. Because it's very potent, and I just wanted a little hint of it here and there. Even as it was, I had to thin it down a whole bunch. So here's where I'm realizing that I didn't do dark lining around the belt, between the belt and the sash. So I like to, Kerniko said our research was very diligent and we should watch something with Ryan Reynolds in it to reward ourselves. That is an excellent idea, and I haven't seen Free Guy yet. So that's, which I do, it looks hilarious, so I do want to see that. I enjoy his level of snark. I like snark in my movies. I mean, I guess I like snark in real life too, but definitely like it in my movies. So I'm just going to get a little blue liner and do the lining, because if I have to paint over lining, that's easier than if I do lining and have to paint over stuff that I already finished. And I know some people feel like lining is very unnatural, but if you think about it, so he's got this belt, and the belt sticks up away from the waist. Actually, I decided this was a girl knoll because girl knolls are super cool. The belt is overhanging something. If the light's coming from here, it's going to cast a shadow underneath the belt. So it is, in fact, more realistic to put a dark line there than it is to not put a dark line there. Now, sure, on the side of this pouch, maybe that's stretching a little. Maybe you want a thinner dark line. Maybe you don't want quite as dark of a line. But in terms of making a miniature that's clearer to read for the viewer and, you know, a little better defined and more interesting, you should go ahead and put in some dark lines, even where it's not 100% as realistic. But wherever things are facing, you know, they're blocking the light, there's going to be a shadow, even if it's just a little line shadow, because it's a belt that's protruding. It's not like a giant object. Because I know people get all in their head about if you paint lining, it's not realistic. It's like a comic book and stuff. And in a lot of ways, it's less realistic to do it. Like if you look at the cloth here, this is meant to be, it's tied over so that there's a top piece of cloth and there's a bottom piece of cloth. And you can kind of see a shadow here from the natural light or from the wash I did, but you can't see it right here. And you should be able to, because there's a little line, you know, there's a little depression in the sculpt. And then you can kind of see it on the bottom because natural light is casting that. If I turn it like that, you can't see it as much because I didn't paint it very dark. So I need to paint that in. Now, I think that I'm using blue liner currently to line around the belt, and I think that that will be a little too dark for that color. But I need to paint something in. That was a color we made up. I might have to go back and watch the stream to figure out what it was. It was a drop of yellow and a drop of something else. And I added a little white. What was the something else, I wonder? Oh, I think it was Doxy Blush. So that's going to be too light to do lining with, but I can mix that with something else and see. Kriniko said we went to see Free Guy in an actual cinema. I never thought it could feel so edgy and exciting. Yeah, we've been waffling on that. Like, we figure if we go maybe like a Tuesday afternoon, we could probably get into the theater when there's not too many other people at the same time. So I'm going to go back to the base coats for now because that painting that line is something I can do while other stuff is drying. Am I in frame? No, I am not. So it seems like we have at least one new person today, if not more, and someone who's also fairly new to painting. You may notice that I'm moving the position of the miniature. And I'm doing that because as much as possible, I pretty much make the same brush stroke or two with my brush hand. So I move the miniature so that I can make that stroke, because it's just like a sport where you're building muscle memory. I'm building muscle memory where I can do this really precisely. So the more I do the same stroke, instead of trying to turn my brush to get under there and get under there and get under there, it's helping me build control of my brush faster than if I were asking my hand to do, 5 or 6 different kinds of motions. It also makes it easier to see, when you have the miniature on a thing like this and you can put it into different positions, it makes it easier to see, if you've missed parts or to get into kind of recessed areas and stuff like that. Oh, Bob and Julie are here. Let's see. Do you ever change how dark the liner is when it goes from a well-lit area to a shadowed area? Yes, absolutely I do. So if you remember, I painted your Hydra, and I used 4 different lining colors when I was lining the scales. So there was a lighter color with a bit more color in it for the scales that were in the best lit area, and then it got progressively darker. So I wanted the lining to appear the same relative darkness regardless of what area of the figure it was on. And I painted that one with a fair degree of light versus shadow area. I was trying to make it look like a strongly lit scene. Well, not strongly, but a fairly strongly lit scene. And if anyone's wondering, yes, there was a blog post on that. And I think it's actually the difference between tabletop and display painting was kind of what prompted me to write that article. So after I came back from the Bones 5 launch party, a lot of people had come up. So we sit at tables, and people can come talk to us, and you have the things you've sculpted or painted or in front of you as a roll, so that if people want to ask you questions about them, they can. And that I got a lot of questions about that Hydra, and I felt like I was kind of disappointing people a lot by being honest and saying, no, I just spent 4 hours painting the lines in. Like, there's no magic wash that makes that happen. The magic wash was time. And I felt kind of bad about bumming people out. So I don't know, I kind of wanted to address the idea that I think a lot of times people think, okay, something like the mermaid or those succubi, it's just, I'm using the same techniques that you use. I've just been doing it long enough, or I have enough knowledge about color or whatever, that I can make it look a little better. And sure, there are techniques I use that, are the same as tabletop techniques. But sometimes it's different techniques, and sometimes it's just more time. Like, if you think about it, the analogy I ended up using in the blog post, I think, was, okay, say I want to bake a pie, and that is not a thing that I do, so I would not be very good at baking a pie if I wanted to do that. I have to, read and reread the recipe, and it would take me a long time to measure stuff out, and I wouldn't be super efficient about it compared to somebody who's, a very experienced home baker or a professional baker. My pie would look worse and take a lot longer to make. But once we're done making the pie and we put it in the oven, my pie is going to take the same amount of time to bake as the pro's pie. And some techniques are just like that. There's no, like, I can do it in 5 seconds. It's like, if I want to do that, if I really want to take it that far, then it's just time. And, there's going to be a lot of times when that's not the right answer. Like, if I were painting that Hydra to play in my home game, I would probably just do a wash and then maybe touch it up in a few spots if it didn't, look great here and there, and just call it a day. So it's not that really one way or the other is right or wrong or better or worse. It's just a lot of it is how much time, what is the function of this object? The function of the Hydra that I painted was to look as good as possible so you guys want to go buy some. And I like kind of trying new things and stretching myself and stuff. And you can see that mostly I just paint humans and humanoids. So for me, it was interesting for Ron to ask me to paint one of the bigger figures, because I don't always get offered the big exciting stuff like Michael gets to paint. And then it was the interesting challenge of trying to paint it to look cool and stuff the way Michael does, because that is why he gets asked to paint the big guys. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, Bob and Julie, but I was showing some of the miniatures that I'm going to be bringing to drop off at Reaper, and everyone was loving your holiday figures and the other figures I have that you'd painted. Like a Sandris, and I feel like there was something else that I'm now forgetting. But certainly the lovely holiday figures. Which I assume that you've been working on Halloween and Christmas things, and that Ron will anytime be asking me to paint those. He claimed he had stuff that I should paint. But then I had to ask him if it existed in real physical form or if it's all just 3D things. So let's see. That's the second coat on the wood. And that did pretty much cover it up, because it's very likely that this paint has some white in it, because it's this color here. And it probably also has ochre, which for the yellows is a pretty high coverage yellow. But yeah, if you get paints where certain colors are not opaque, it is because a very skillful paint mixer has made it that way. It's not because paint is... So when things are transparent, it's not because they're cheaping out and they're not putting enough pigment in. You can put all the phthalo blue you want in something, phthalo blue. It's going to be transparent. That's what phthalo blue is. Or that pink that I showed you. Okay, what am I looking for? Good brush. So if you choose to mainly use more opaque colors, and certainly you could make a pretty opaque set out of Reaper paints, just because every paint that they make isn't opaque doesn't mean that the paint line as a whole is crap. I mean, it offers you flexibility. But if you prefer to prioritize opaque colors because of the type of painting you do, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the idea of saying that if a paint line includes transparent colors, that means that it's crappy and they're ripping you off. Because certainly when I'm painting reds, I tend to reach for the Bones reds, because they are less transparent, and I can get on with the rest of my life, unless I'm being super, super specific about the exact color that I want, which does happen occasionally, but not that often. So almost all those Christmas minis I painted were painted with like Bones Brilliant Red, and I forget the names of the other ones. It's the cooler reds. I tend to use the cooler reds, not the warmer reds. For Christmas, anyway. To me, like more of a crimson type color seems more Christmassy. Or more traditional Christmas. I mean, not Christmassy exactly, I guess. Yeah, if you start... Eris Noir said I didn't know about differences in paint. And if you have a transparent blue color, you can get full vibrant colors by doing more layers. Yes, so you can layer them up, or another trick you can do is start with a color, you know, like this kind of blue that's less transparent, and then put your transparent blue over for a couple of coats. And that should get you a nice vivid blue. Or yellow or red. And I've learned about paint because I also do traditional art, and I just kind of enjoy nerding out about paint. It's certainly not something that you have to know. about paint properties necessarily to paint miniatures well. There's some things that might be helpful to know, but I'm sure that there are plenty of miniature painters and plenty of canvas painters who really don't know much about how paint works at all. And they do just fine. But back in the before times, my local art store used to have people come in. There were representatives like Golden and Liquitex and other companies. And they would bring us lovely samples, which was very nice, but also share information that was cool to learn. Hopefully one day we'll be able to do that again. Yeah, if you have a good local art store in your area, once events start up again, you might check if they have like demonstrations or talks and stuff to get free samples. Another one that I liked when they they had somebody come in and talk a lot about like all the mediums and additives and texture paste and stuff, and they didn't like get into all of the information because there's kind of a lot, but they made that much more easy to understand, and they gave me some cool samples that will be fun for doing bases with. And I think that's on Reaper's YouTube. So last, I can't remember now if it was Reapercon or virtual Reapercon. But one of them I did a. Well, now I'm not sure it is on the YouTube. Anyway, you can check it. But I did. Yeah, no, it's there. It's additives, mediums, additives, and texture paste. So my was like I tried to give you the miniature painter's version of what is all this stuff. Why would I use it? How would I use it? The video quality, it was Zoom, so it's not great. But I kind of hate Zoom for art stuff. The video quality is just so terrible. So some of the stuff where I say, as you can see, you probably can't see. And I didn't realize that until I went back and watched the video after. And I'm like, nope, you can't see anything. This is just like when I do those watercolor courses. And they say, as you can see on Zoom. And nope, you can't. But yeah, if you've been confused about like what is glaze medium and why do I tell you to mix brush on sealer into your washes and what is retarder and all that kind of stuff, that's in that video. All right, so that's my base color. And while I'm here, because like I said, I think the fur on the face, I just needed to define that light area, or the brown area a little more. Add some lightness to it. Probably gonna have to go lighter than that, but kind of work it in as I work on the other parts. Because I want her face to stand out for sure. All right, so now I'm going to do a different wash on the wood than I am on the belt because I want the wood to look kind of like old and a little grayed out, and I don't want the belt to look like that. So what am I going to do? Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do the messy wash first. So for anyone who missed it, a great way to reuse these things is you can do washes in them so that you don't have to get your other paint surface messed up. I have little palettes that I bought to do washes as well, and that was like way too much paint for what we're going to do. I'll take some of that out and save it in case of something else. I have lost my brush on sealer, it looks like. Oh, Weber makes this stuff wash medium, which I also talk about in the thing, which is kind of half brush on sealer and half water. I mean, it's half medium and half water. Okay, I'm going to turn this off for a minute because I got to use my real mixer. All right. So the reason I would use this is because if you like really, really thin down pigments, you're kind of, Anne calls it breaking the paint. It doesn't really matter for a wash or a glaze, but medium is also less runny than water. So I kind of like it on that basis. You know what? I'm not sure that's dark enough. So I'm going to, since I said I wanted it to be grayed wood, I'm going to just add in some dark gray. Assuming I can figure out what I did with my dark gray. Oh, that's not that much darker. I'm going to add just a little smidge of black, actually. Or even, you know what? I had the blue liner on my palette, and I often put a little blue into old wood. Let's just grab a brush of that and see what that does. Yeah, that's graying it out a little. So that's taking the yellows and the browns and graying them out as well as making it darker. I don't know if you can see with the glare. That's kind of the color I ended up with, and that's the starting color of the base. And this is a wash, so I'm just going to gloop it on. It's the scientific word. Possible that'll dry a little later than I'd like, but we'll find out. Since the, where was that color I found? There it is. Since the belt is smaller, I'm going to stick with quick layering for the shadows. Now this, I'm going to show you because this may happen to you. Because you know I normally tell you to shake your paints longer than you shake them because I did it before the stream. Well, I didn't mix this color before the stream, and it's not super, you'll get this transparency watery look. It's not a lot of that, but there's enough of that, and based on what I know about this color, I'm pretty sure that I did not mix it enough. So I'm just going to put the kind of thin stuff back. It's not a big deal if you don't put it back. I usually try to do that. Make sure I get the ball moving, and then you hear the mixer just for a minute. Hopefully that doesn't sound too awful. Yeah, and that looks much more like what I would expect that paint to look like. So use your paints, get to know what they usually look like so that you can kind of spot when they don't. I mean, there are sometimes ones that look a little more transparent, but it shouldn't look like watery transparent. If that makes sense. And then while I'm here, what do we like for highlight color? You know, I'll go with the Nod Bone or Treasure Map. I think Treasure Map. So this is one of the, well, now I don't know if this was this year's, I think this is one of last year's colors. Since they were also pirate themed, I thought that they were suitable for use on our pirate knoll. And then after today, I will get to put these paints on my shelf and integrate them, I think. So we've done several experiments now where I should be more familiar with these paints than I was a few months ago. Trashorama confirms that Treasure Map was 2020. Oh, Trash, the pre-con scramble. Yeah, I'm kind of amazed that you came at all because I probably wouldn't have if I wasn't running the show. well into pre-con panic mode. So I'm just doing a little pre-mixing, although I may end up mixing with my brush, but my brush is very tiny and I don't want to get a whole bunch of paint all up in the ferrule. Green user says, ask Ron to tease. You have to have a gag order. Yeah, I don't. That's all the information I got out of him. That there are things he wants me to paint. So, Trash says he picked up 20 to 30 board games this morning. So I hope you're gonna go hang out with my husband at the board game area. And Reaper will have a library of board games as well. So if you aren't, like Trash, able to bring board games, there are games there that you can kind of, it's like a library, so you can kind of take some games out and go play them with your friends and then bring them back later. Or if you want to like learn how to play some games, my husband is also there to teach and play with people. So I end up hardly seeing him during the con because he's doing all the board gaming stuff and I'm running around doing all the miniature stuff. We enjoy a nice breakfast together. Yeah, I almost feel like that belt is just too light. I think it's going to detract too much from the face. So this is the thing, when you do on-the-fly painting, you have to accept that sometimes you may have to go over and tweak or change things for kind of optimal results in terms of getting focus and defining areas and stuff like that. All that stuff we've been talking about for the past few months when we were revising the blacksmith and the bugbear and talking about contest entry considerations, which are not just for contest entries, because that's a lot of the things that tabletop players know to do. People who are trying to paint display miniatures will think it doesn't apply to them, and then sometimes vice versa. So it's very useful to know about color theory for painting tabletop miniatures, because you can use the contrast of color, contrast of saturation are very effective in painting a tabletop miniature that jumps off the table, as it were. I think that's a bit less distracting with color. Yeah, I'm still gonna have to work on the face. Trash Runner says I need a friend library. Check out friends and then take them back. Well, I just told you my friend's captive. My husband's captive to play board games with you. So you have at least one friend. Also, I'm sure that if you tell everyone who you are, that you will have more friends. People at Reapercon are very friendly, and they understand being an introvert or like it's your first one, but it is pretty much not a stressful thing as most introverts will think, to just kind of try talking to some people that are sitting at the table with you or whatever at the breakfast at Reapercon. The people who, if you take the tour, the people who take the tour with you, and I do highly recommend taking the tour. I believe Ed still has slots left in the you have to get yourself there tour. So I think they sold out of the tours that included going on the bus. But I think the ones where if you can get yourself there, which again, friends can help with. If you go on the Reaper forums, there's usually a thread of, people trying to do airport pools and stuff like that. I didn't talk to a lot of people my first Reapercon, but it was way smaller then. It was like way smaller then. My first one was the second Reapercon. And then I skipped the third one because it was so hot that I needed a year to get over that. It used to be, it was in May, I think. April or May. I mean, not that Texas isn't hot. Late August, early September, I'm sure, but it was at the factory too, so the air conditioning, there's air conditioning there, but it's not as consistent. It's like you might be very hot or very cold depending on your proximity to the fans. But by the next time I went, I was much more comfortable talking to people. So don't be me. Don't waste a year. Believe me when I say that most of the people that are going to be there completely understand being awkward introvert geeks. We're all awkward introvert geeks, and we get to geek out together about one of our favorite things. So that's the cool part about it. Maybe I do. And for those of you who aren't coming, my understanding is that there is going to be plenty of stuff online. Trash says people on Discord are already looking to share Uber rides. Hi, Grey Moser. So I decided just to get a slightly darker brown. Just add a little bit more to the shadows. Then go back to the highlights. That will help me keep the zone of interest up here more, I think. I'm going to have to do stuff to the face for that too. Can I see well enough to do that stuff on stream is a different question, but I may give it a try. If I do a little dot with the saturated color, that should make the eyes stand out. But what color? What if we did a really bright blue? No, I don't have a really bright blue. That will make it harder. Weirdly, there weren't that many blues in the... I mean, there's a couple of blues. So there's this blue with Shark Bite, which was from last year. And then this year we got this really pretty Storm Chaser blue. But those are not eye-popping type blues. So I'm going to mooch stuff from Mermaid, I think. Or my class project. I'm going to mooch stuff from my class project. I got Green Teal and Surf Aqua, which really aren't true blue, but... Trash is debating whether packing up the wet palette will be worth it. Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't end up, if I'm not teaching at a con, I don't end up painting at a convention that much because I want to do the other stuff, hang out with people. But it's a nice way to just kind of sit and have a quiet moment if you need that. Or if you're the kind of person, and this is a good kind of person to be, where you take a class in something and then you want to sit down and practice it, it's helpful to have some stuff. But I think that if you're willing to paint without a wet palette, you can still practice a bit. Or you can just bring some parchment sheets and make a quick one with paper towel and parchment. So I'm going on the premise of the demon influenced part and doing like a solid color eye that glows a bit instead of an eye with the people and all that. Largely so that it will kind of, I mean, that's already, not even sure if you can see the blue. I can't really see the blue on my monitor, but I can see it popping a lot more, which is nice. That's what I wanted, was more popping. And then I'll get just a little. Hi, cutie patootie. Yeah, you came in on so it's this Thursday Reapercon starts. So probably all the Reaper things, if you come to any of our other many activities, you will hear people talking about Reapercon. So it's an annual convention, and it's really grown. Like I said, I was talking about being at the first one. I'm not even sure what year we're on now. I feel like 2003 was the first one. 2004, I want to say was the first one. So now it's a much bigger event with a lot more activities and stuff. But there are classes for painting miniatures, for sculpting miniatures. There's a board game library. There's a contest that you enter, and then a big award ceremony. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop talking for just a minute. Oh, because I was trying to dot this I. There are tables where you can hang out and paint in your own time, although you do have to bring your own stuff. There's a meet and greet Wednesday night. They did karaoke last year, but I don't think they can do it this year. There's going to be a gauntlet tournament, the old classic arcade game. So it's gotten to the point where people are even bringing, like, spouses. Oh, there's a ton of role-playing games. How did I forget that? And friends that may not be super into miniatures, because there's enough other activities that you can do that. And then there's kind of fun miniature activities. There's like Sophie Says, where you have to paint with the color. Stuff gets rolled on a dice, I think, or the moderator just randomly decides when to change things up, and it'll be like, you have to paint with your offhand, or you have to paint using the color red right now. So it's like a fun speed paint challenge. There's some other ones too, but I'm not remembering. There may just be like straight up speed painting. I feel like there was another hobby hijinks activity. If anyone in the chat knows. Craig Mouser says, I wish I could go for the gauntlet tournament alone. Yeah, it's going to be kind of cool. For the past few years now, they've typically brought in a couple of arcade cabinets, and they'll be set up so that they have multiple games on them. The gauntlet is like that. That's actually Ron's, and it's the full gauntlet 4-player thing. That's not one of these not simulators. I don't remember, but it's just gauntlet, unlike the cabinets. But then there's usually a couple of traditional pinball machines too, and I like those. I'm terrible, but I like them. No, that's the best part, Grey Mouser. It's all free play. No quarters. Because, yeah, as bad as I play, I would go broke if I tried to play with quarters. me just do a time check, because lately I've been bad at noticing that. Yeah, we only have about 10 minutes left. So alas, I will probably not finish this before I go. But I will try to decide if the base is too light, but we'll live with it. Let's see, I will do a bit of dry brushing. I need more sky smog. Julie gave us some great texture to work with for dry brushing. Grey Monster says Friday nights in the 80s in West Edmonton Mall were gauntlet and hockey. I lived in Toronto and we used to go down to Yonge Street, go to the really big arcades. Which they may, I mean, even long past the 80s, there were still a few arcades and they would have like the old games like Centipede and Defender and stuff in the back. We would, of course, go to the mall, but the Eaton Center didn't have an arcade, probably because what is the point if you're on Yonge Street and you know that there's like 15 arcades down the street? So yes, when the sculptors give you a nice texture like that to work with, it doesn't take a lot of work to make something look pretty good. Add just a little more very small areas of highlight. So instead of drying, I'm just going to touch the brush down and lift up so I don't get too much chalkiness. So that's a tip for if you're doing kind of the lighter colors that have white in them for your dry brushing. Try that up and down thing with your brush and try to keep it confined to smaller areas and see if that helps. But what I do want to do, I can find my smaller brush, is I want to bring out the lines in between the planks. So I think that wash did a decent job of bringing out the wood texture kind of thing within the planks, but I want to accent the lines between the planks again. Hey, Yankee 2014. Am I in view? I don't know if I am. Let's see. Try there. So I'm letting the sculpted part guide me. If I put the tip of my brush down there and I just use a light pressure, I should be able to pull along the line that's sculpted. And this is how I do, the lining with the belt. I was holding the bristles of the brush next to the lip that's sculpted there and kind of pulling it up a little. So if you can't use a strong pressure because then you really are going to pull it right up onto the other thing that you're trying not to get paint on. But if you just kind of rest the brush tip against the shelf of the part that protrudes and then draw it along the line horizontally, that can help you keep your brush steady and get a cleaner line with slightly less stress. Because I get that the other reason people don't want to do lining is because it's like stressful and you don't want to mess stuff up. But don't lie and tell yourself it's because you think it's not realistic. It's realistic. There should be shadows in between these boards. If you have an old wooden floor, you can see the cracks because the cracks are deeper than the grain of the wood. So it should look darker in between the planks than it looks within the planks. And I'm going to add just a little more darkness back around the feet because I got a little bit too much paint there. And then the wash came over some parts here. So I will probably end up finishing this guy at Reapercon, you know, if there's times when I'm not doing anything, or we often stay a little while after. It will be something for me to work on. So I probably won't save him until my next stream. Well, maybe I'll work on my next stream at Reapercon, which I don't 100% know if that's happening or not. I have not had confirmation. I would assume that I would be streaming while I'm there, but I don't 100% know. So if you're free, come next week and see if I'm here or not, I guess. Hopefully I will get to see you. Let's see, I could tell you about some other shows. You know what? I don't entirely know everything that is happening this week. So I don't think there's a Crow's Nest. There should be a Miniatures Den. That's Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central. I would guess there's also going to be a Crafty Creative, which is Thursday at 2 p.m. Central. But the schedule might be mixed up. So my understanding is they're going to have stuff streaming from 9 to 9 every day of the convention. Which, well, my guess is Sunday might not, because real activities, you know, real in-person activities don't go the whole day Sunday. But Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it's possible Sunday, there should be stuff from 9 to 9. Whether it's going to include the normally scheduled stuff, oops, I was totally off frame there, sorry. Whether it's going to include the normally scheduled stuff or not, I do not know. But since I will still be at Reaper on Monday, if they have the possibility for me to film and we're not being, you know, there's not some other thing that we need to do instead, I should be there filming. And I guess I could bring this guy and finish him up there. In my imagination, I was hoping I would get him finished by today so that I could send pictures to Ron in the event that he wanted them for the store boxes or whatever. But I suspect that's not going to happen. Maybe if I finish packing early, I will have time to do that, but I consider chances low. Because this is really, I mean, he's really close to finished. I gotta do buckles, I gotta do the sack. I gotta finish the face and, well, buckles and the hilt. And then I wanted to, you know, pirate up the non-metallic metal a little. Oh, I guess he has claws too. She has claws. All right. Anyway, so I don't know what else to tell you about yes, there should be a Reaper Errant. There should be a special Reaper Errant. I don't 100% know if it's going to be at the same time. My feeling is that it's not. It's still going to be Friday, but it's going to be at a different time on Friday. It's going to be a bit earlier, is my guess. Hopefully they will start putting out a schedule for the, here, let me come back over this view. Hopefully they'll put out a schedule for the virtual event soon so that we won't have to guess. But I am told that there's going to be a special Reaper Errant, and I'm very excited about that. We get to play in person, which is unusual. Well, we've never done it for Reaper Errant. We've played other games, but we've never done it for Reaper Errant on camera where you all get to see our shenanigans. There may be even more shenanigans. Oh, Trash says we may or may not have painted up some stuff for Reaper Errant. Oh. Yeah, I suspect that bad things are going to happen to us. Bad things are going to happen to us. But I'm sure hilarity will ensue, as it often does when bad things happen to us. Because, you know, we've been trying to deal with who's ever trying to sabotage these talks that the town's trying to have. So stuff is probably about to go down. But thank you all for coming. I apologize for the coughing and everything. And if you see me at Reapercon, I'm sure that I will be apologizing for it there too. This is normally what my throat is like 2 days into Reapercon, so I'm a little Like, I was asking my husband, like, okay, what program can I use on my iPad if I need to type and rest my voice or something? But I'm sure that we'll have fun however we're communicating. And I hope that if you're not coming in person, you still watch some of the streams and have fun with that. I know there's classes. There are classes you can sign up for that are online classes as well. Or you can just watch the shenanigans. There'll probably be interviews and I would imagine there might be another game other than Reaper Errant as well. Trash says the virtual schedule is coming, so just keep an eye out for that and come have fun with us at the same time as us. I don't know, however you want to put it. But thank you all for coming. I don't think Quindy's here, so I don't know if we're going to get a raid or not. Who's ever moderating, who I'm guessing is Kirinico, because Kirinico kept providing links and names of things that I ramblingly didn't know. But so let me know whether we're going to go to raid or not, or if I'm just going to wave and click the stop button. Gary Sonora, you're welcome. I hope you had a nice time. Come see me again every Monday afternoon, I guess. Green Eco just likes helping. You were very helpful. Thank you. So I'm going to assume there's no stream. And thank you all for not, doing things that Twitch doesn't like, because it looks like we were unsupervised. So see you all next week, I hope.